I found my mom's old diary in the attic and discovered I have a sibling she never told me about. The leather-bound book was wedged behind Christmas decorations, dust-covered and forgotten. Mom had been dead for 6 months when I finally worked up courage to sort through her things. Dad couldn't bear to do it himself. I almost put it back. Reading someone's private thoughts felt like trespassing, even if that someone was my mother, but something made me flip to a random page. March 15th, 1987. Brought Cassian home from the hospital today. He's perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, those same green eyes as his sister. But Richard doesn't know. Can't know. Not yet. My hands started shaking. I was born in 1986. This entry was from the year after. I flipped frantically through pages, looking for more mentions of this Cassian. April the 2nd, 1987. Had to tell Aunt Vera the truth today. She's the only one I trust. Cassian can't stay here. Richard's temper has gotten worse since the promotion. Yesterday, he threw a plate at the wall just because dinner was cold. What would he do to a baby that isn't his? The room spun around me. Dad's temper. I remembered the holes in our walls, the way Mom would flinch when he raised his voice. April 10th, 1987. Vera found a family. The Hendersons live 2 towns over. Good people who can't have children. I signed the papers today. My heart is breaking, but Cassian deserves better than what I can give him here. Someday when things are different, I'll find him. I'll explain. Pages of guilt, longing, regret. Mom had given away my brother to protect him from Dad's rage. She'd carried this secret for 37 years. The final entry about Cassian was from last year, June 3rd, 2023. Saw him at graduation. He was accepting an award for outstanding achievement. So tall, so handsome. He looked happy. His adoptive parents were beaming with pride. I wanted to run to him, but what right do I have? I gave up that right long ago. At least I know he's okay. My phone rang, startling me. It was Dad. Find anything interesting up there? He asked. I clutched the diary to my chest, my pulse hammering. Just some old photo albums, I lied. Well, don't take all day. We've got that estate lawyer coming tomorrow to finalize everything. After he hung up, I sat in the dusty attic staring at my mother's careful handwriting. Somewhere out there was my brother, Cassian Henderson. It took 3 hours of internet searching, but I found him. Facebook profile, LinkedIn, even a newspaper article about his promotion at the engineering firm. He lived in Millbrook. Mom's mysterious Sunday drive suddenly made sense. I was drafting a message when I heard Dad's car in the driveway. Quickly, I shoved the diary into my purse and climbed down from the attic. At dinner, Dad seemed unusually chatty. You know, I was thinking, he said, cutting his steak. After we sell the house, you should consider moving back home. Help your old man out. The way he smiled made my stomach turn. Actually, Dad, I've been meaning to tell you something. His fork paused midway to his mouth. I found Mom's diary today. His face went white, then red, then something darker. You had no right? I know about Cassian. The words hung between us like a loaded gun. Dad's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. That name doesn't exist in this house. Mom gave him away because of you. Because she was afraid. His hand slammed down on the table so hard the plates jumped. Your mother was a lying whore who couldn't keep her legs closed. Something in me snapped. Don't you dare! I know exactly what you're thinking, Dad interrupted, his eyes narrowing. You want to play happy families with some bastard who was never part of this family? Well, let me tell you something about your precious brother. My blood turned to ice. You know about him? Dad's smile was cruel and cold. Sweetheart, who do you think told the Hendersons that their adopted son's biological father wanted him back? The room tilted. I couldn't breathe. What are you saying? I'm saying you're too late. I already found Cassian. Dad leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. And tomorrow, when that lawyer gets here, he's going to explain exactly why your brother will never want to see you. The kitchen felt like it was closing in on me. My father's words echoed in my skull as I tried to process what he'd just revealed. He knew. He'd known all along about Cassian. And somehow he'd already gotten to him. What did you do? I whispered. Dad straightened up, smoothing his shirt with the same calculated movements I'd watched him use in business meetings my whole life. The rage was gone, replaced by something worse. Satisfaction. What I had to do to protect this family's reputation. He picked up his fork again, cutting another piece of steak as if we were discussing the weather. Did you really think I'd let some illegitimate child waltz back into our lives and claim what isn't his? I felt sick. Mom's inheritance belongs to legitimate heirs only. Dad chewed slowly, watching my reaction. The Hendersons were very understanding when I explained the situation. Apparently their boy has been having some questions about his origins lately. I simply provided some clarity. What kind of clarity? The smile that spread across his face made my skin crawl. The truth. That his biological mother was unstable. That she abandoned him because she couldn't handle raising a child. That his biological father, me, never wanted him in the first place. He paused, savoring my horror. And that his so-called sister is just a gold digger trying to manipulate him for money. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. You bastard. Language. Dad's voice carried that same warning tone from my childhood, the one that used to make me cower. I've spent the last 6 months building a very compelling case. Bank records showing your mother's erratic spending. Medical records I acquired, documenting her mental health struggles. Even some creative editing of family photos. You forged evidence? I protected our family. He leaned forward again. Your brother received quite an education about his origins, complete with documentation proving that any contact from you would be nothing more than manipulation. The Hendersons were so grateful for my honesty that they've completely cut off any possibility of reunion. The room was spinning. Everything I'd hoped for, every fantasy of meeting my brother was crumbling around me. Why? I managed to ask. Because some secrets are meant to stay buried. Dad finished his steak and set down his fork. Tomorrow, when Lawyer Whitmore arrives, You'll discover that your mother's will has some very specific clauses about illegitimate children. Clauses that ensure this family's assets stay where they belong. I stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the monster my mother had been so afraid of. The man who'd driven her to give away her own child rather than risk his wrath. I hate you, I whispered. That's your prerogative. Dad stood up, collecting his plate. But hate won't change the facts. Your brother wants nothing to do with you. He believes you're exactly what I told him you are. A manipulative opportunist. And tomorrow, when this estate is finalized, you'll understand exactly how little power you actually have in this family. He walked to the kitchen, leaving me alone at the table with the debris of our dinner and the ruins of my hopes. But as I sat there, something else began building inside me. Not just grief or disappointment, but something harder, angrier. Dad had underestimated me. He'd spent so long controlling and manipulating everyone around him that he'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was my mother's daughter. And if Mom had been brave enough to save one child from his toxicity, maybe I could be brave enough to save another. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent hours going through every document in Mom's desk, every file on her computer, every scrap of paper that might give me ammunition. What I found was better than I could have hoped. Mom had kept everything. Not just the diary, but copies of correspondence with the adoption agency, photos of Cassian that she'd taken from a distance over the years, and most importantly, a detailed record of Dad's abuse. Documentation she'd apparently been building for years, maybe planning to use for a divorce she never lived to file. There were medical records from emergency room visits, where she'd claimed to have fallen downstairs, bank statements showing how Dad controlled every penny of their finances, even audio recordings she'd made on her phone during his worst rages. But the real treasure was a manila envelope hidden behind her jewelry box. Inside were copies of the original adoption papers, and they told a very different story than the one Dad had constructed. Mom hadn't abandoned Cassian. She'd made the most selfless choice imaginable, working with a reputable agency to ensure he went to a loving family. The adoption records showed months of careful screening, multiple meetings with the Hendersons, and most tellingly, a clause that allowed for future contact if all parties agreed. There was also something Dad clearly hadn't known about, a letter Mom had written to Cassian, to be opened when he turned 18. According to the adoption agency's records, the letter had been delivered to the Hendersons in 2005. If Dad had really poisoned Cassian against his birth family, why hadn't he mentioned the letter? I spent the rest of the night crafting a plan. The next morning, Dad was practically humming as he set up for Lawyer Whitmore's visit. He'd transformed our living room into a makeshift office with neat stacks of papers and that predatory smile he wore during business negotiations. You might want to dress nicely for this, he told me over breakfast. It's going to be an important day. I'm sure it is. I kept my voice neutral, even though my heart was pounding. Whitmore arrived at exactly 10 o'clock. A thin man in an expensive suit who carried himself like he'd spent his career doing rich people's dirty work. Dad greeted him with the kind of hearty handshake reserved for co-conspirators. Shall we get started? Whitmore asked, setting his briefcase on our coffee table. Actually, I interrupted before Dad could respond. I think we're waiting for one more person. Dad's head snapped toward me. What are you talking about? The doorbell rang. That would be him now. I walked to the door, ignoring Dad's increasingly frantic questions. Cassian Henderson stood on our doorstep. He was taller than I'd expected, with Mom's green eyes and her gentle smile. But there was something else in his expression. Wariness, maybe even anger. You must be Elena, he said, his voice carefully controlled. And you're my brother. The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. Dad appeared behind me, his face cycling through shock, fury, and calculation in the span of seconds. What the hell is he doing here? Dad hissed. Cassian's eyes moved to Dad, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hello, Richard. Cassian's voice was ice. Or should I call you Dad? The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I think, Cassian continued, stepping past me into the house, it's time we all had an honest conversation. Whitmore was gathering his papers, clearly uncomfortable with the turn events had taken. Perhaps I should reschedule. No. Cassian's voice cut through the lawyer's retreat. I think you need to hear this too. Dad finally found his voice. You don't belong here. I told you. You told me a lot of things. Cassian reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. But you forgot about this. He held up Mom's letter. Dad's face went ashen. How did you? The Hendersons gave it to me on my 18th birthday. Exactly as my birth mother requested. Cassian's eyes never left Dad's face. It was quite an education, learning about the man who terrorized my mother so badly that she felt she had to give me away to keep me safe. That's not. There's more. Cassian pulled out his phone. See, after you contacted the Hendersons with your very creative version of events, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Amazing what a good private investigator can turn up when you give them enough time. He swiped through his phone and turned the screen toward us. It showed a photograph. Dad coming out of some kind of medical building. This was taken 3 months ago, Cassian said, right after you visited Dr. Patterson's office to request copies of my birth mother's medical records. Of course, you didn't have authorization to access those records, which makes what you did a felony. Dad's hands were shaking now. You can't prove. Actually, I can. Cassian swiped to another photo. Dr. Patterson was very cooperative once I explained the situation. Turns out he's been wondering for months why someone would forge authorization documents to access a dead patient's files. Whitmore was looking between Dad and Cassian like he was watching a tennis match, his professional composure cracking. There's also the matter of the forged bank statements. Cassian continued, pulling out more documents, and the manipulated family photos. My investigator was very thorough. I found my voice. How did you know to look into all this? Cassian's expression softened when he looked at me. Because Mom's letter told me about you. About how much she loved both her children and how sorry she was that she couldn't keep us together. She begged me to find you someday, to make sure you were okay. His voice hardened as he turned back to Dad. She also warned me about him. Dad was backing toward the kitchen, but Cassian continued relentlessly. The letter explained everything. How Richard's abuse escalated after I was born. How she was afraid he'd hurt me. How she found a loving family who could give me what she couldn't. Safety. Cassian's voice broke slightly. She never abandoned me. She saved me. Tears were streaming down my face. Why didn't you contact me sooner? Because I was afraid. Cassian's admission was quiet. When Richard showed up with his story about gold-digging half-sisters and unstable mothers, part of me wondered if it might be true. I'd spent my whole life wondering why my birth mother gave me up. His version fit with my worst fears. But you investigated anyway? My adoptive parents raised me to question everything and verify the facts. Cassian smiled sadly. They also raised me to protect family. Once I read Mom's letter, really read it, I knew I had to find out the truth. And when I did, he looked at Dad with undisguised disgust. I realized what kind of man you really are. Dad had reached the kitchen doorway. This is all lies. Is it? Cassian pulled out one more document. Because I also have this. It was a police report. My hands flew to my mouth as I read the date, 3 days after I was born. Domestic disturbance call, Cassian read aloud. Eleanor Valdez reported that her husband Richard had thrown her against a wall while she was holding their newborn daughter. She declined to press charges. Mom had called the police on Dad. She'd tried to protect us both. There are more reports, Cassian said quietly. 7 years worth. All documenting a pattern of escalating abuse. My investigator found them in sealed court files. Whitmore was packing up his briefcase, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Mr. Valdez, in light of these developments, I think it would be best if we postponed. No, Dad's voice was desperate now. The will is clear. He's not legitimate. Actually, Cassian interrupted, I had my lawyer review the will. The language specifically refers to all children born to Eleanor Valdez. It doesn't make any distinction about legitimacy. Dad's face crumpled. But you don't want. What I want, Cassian said firmly, is justice for our mother and protection for my sister. He turned to me. Elena, I need you to know that Mom wrote about you constantly in that letter. How smart you were, how kind, how worried she was about leaving you alone with him. Cassian gestured toward Dad. She made me promise to look out for you if anything happened to her. I was sobbing now. I thought you hated me, Dad said a lot of things. Cassian's voice was gentle. None of them were true. This is insane, Dad burst out. You can't just waltz in here and steal what belongs to who? Cassian's voice cut like a blade. To the man who terrorized his pregnant wife, who caused so much fear that she felt she had to give away her newborn son, who spent 37 years lying to his daughter about her brother's existence. Dad lunged forward, but Cassian was ready for him. At 37, my brother was bigger and stronger than our 62-year-old father. He caught Dad's wrist easily, stopping the swing mid-motion. I wouldn't, Cassian said quietly. Not with witnesses present. Whitmore had his phone out, clearly ready to call the police. Let me go, Dad snarled. Gladly. Cassian released him, and Dad stumbled backward. But first, you're going to listen very carefully to what happens next. Cassian walked to the coffee table and spread out a series of documents. This is a restraining order, he said, pointing to the first paper. Elena filed it this morning, with my full support and testimony. You're not allowed within 500 feet of her. Dad's face went purple. This is my house. Actually, it's not. Cassian pointed to the next document. According to Mom's will, the real one, not whatever version you've been planning to present, this house goes to all surviving children equally. Since Elena is a minor, I'm 24, I interrupted. Since Elena is an adult but has been financially dependent on you due to your controlling behavior, Cassian corrected smoothly. And since I'm the older sibling, I'm assuming guardianship of her interests. This house is being transferred into a trust that protects her from further manipulation. You can't do this. I can, and I have. Cassian's voice was implacable. I've also reported your forgery of medical documents to the authorities. And your attempted fraud regarding the adoption records. Oh, and the domestic violence charges. What domestic violence charges? Cassian smiled coldly. The ones Elena is filing based on the evidence Mom collected over the years. Evidence that shows a clear pattern of abuse that continues to this day. I looked at my brother in amazement. How did you? Mom's diary wasn't the only thing she hid, Cassian said gently. She also recorded audio on her phone. Hours and hours of verbal abuse, threats, and admissions of physical violence. It's all admissible in court. Dad was backing toward the door now, panic written across his face. Where are you going to go? Cassian asked conversationally. Your bank accounts have been frozen pending the fraud investigation. Your credit cards have been canceled, and in about an hour the police are going to arrive with a warrant for your arrest. This is all lies, Dad screamed. She's manipulating you. Actually, I said, finding my voice at last, I'm done being manipulated by anyone. I walked to the kitchen and returned with a digital recorder, one of several I'd hidden around the house the night before. Everything you said at dinner yesterday, I recorded it. Your confession about forging evidence, bribing the Hendersons, manipulating Cassian, all of it. I looked him in the eye. You taught me well, Dad. Always have a backup plan. The look of betrayal on his face would have broken my heart 24 hours ago. Now, it just made me feel free. You're both making a mistake, Dad said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. The only mistake, Cassian said quietly, was Mom staying with you as long as she did. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Dad looked between us one last time, his face cycling through rage, desperation, and finally, defeat. Then he bolted for the back door. Let him go, Cassian said when I moved to follow. The police will find him. We stood in the suddenly quiet living room, looking at each other across 37 years of separation. I have so many questions, I said finally. Cassian smiled. Mom's smile. I have time for all of them. Whitmore cleared his throat. If you'll excuse me, I believe I need to withdraw from this case. Probably wise, Cassian agreed. My lawyer will be in touch about Mom's actual will. After Whitmore scurried out, Cassian and I sat on the couch. the same couch where Dad had laid out his manipulation just yesterday. Is it really over? I asked. The legal stuff will take time, Cassian admitted. But the important part? Yes, you're free. I started crying again, but this time it was relief. I can't believe you're real. I can't believe you came. I promised Mom I would. Cassian reached into his jacket and pulled out another envelope. She wrote you a letter too. My hands shook as I opened it. Mom's handwriting filled 2 pages, telling me how much she loved me, how sorry she was for not being strong enough to leave Dad, and how proud she was of the woman she knew I'd become. The last paragraph broke my heart and put it back together at the same time. My darling Elena, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. But I need you to know that every day I stayed was worth it because it meant keeping you safe. I failed Cassian by giving him away, but I couldn't fail you too. Your brother is the strongest, kindest person I know, and when you meet him, you'll understand why I knew he'd survive without me. But you needed me, and I needed to be there for you, no matter the cost. I love you both beyond measure, and I know that together, you'll take care of each other the way I couldn't take care of both of you. Find each other, love each other, and don't let Richard's poison touch either of your hearts. She never failed you, I told Cassian through my tears. She saved your life, and she saved yours by staying. Cassian put his arm around me. We're both here because she made impossible choices out of love. The police arrived an hour later. Dad had tried to flee to Mexico, but made it only as far as the airport before being arrested. The charges were extensive: fraud, forgery, domestic violence, and several others that Cassian's lawyer had built from Mom's hidden evidence. Over the next few months, I learned about my brother's life. The Hendersons had been wonderful parents who'd given him every advantage while never letting him forget he was loved. He'd become a civil engineer, married his college sweetheart, and had 2 young daughters who I immediately fell in love with. Mom would have been so proud, I told him as we watched his girls play in the backyard of his house. Now, our house, since I'd moved to be near my newfound family. She knew, Cassian said confidently. Remember her diary entry about graduation? She was there. She saw who I became. I thought about all those mysterious Sunday drives, all the times Mom had seemed sad without explanation. She'd been watching her son from a distance, making sure he was happy and safe. Do you think she knew we'd find each other? Cassian smiled. I think she made sure we would. Dad was sentenced to 5 years in prison. I testified at his trial, reading portions of Mom's diary and playing the audio recordings. When the judge asked if I had anything to say before sentencing, I stood up and looked at the man who'd controlled my life for 24 years. You taught me that family is about power and control, I said. But my real family taught me it's about love and protection and sacrifice. My mother gave up one child to save him and stayed with you to save the other. My brother gave up his comfortable life to come rescue a sister he'd never met. That's what family actually looks like. Dad stared at me with empty eyes. Prison had aged him years in just a few months. I forgive you, I continued. Not because you deserve it, but because Mom would want me to. But I'll never forget what you did, and I'll never let you hurt anyone else. He was led away without saying a word. Afterward, Cassian and I drove to Mom's grave. We'd had a new headstone made, one that included both our names as her beloved children. Do you think she can see us? I asked as we stood there together. I think she's been watching over us all along. Cassian placed a bouquet of roses on the grave, Mom's favorite flowers. She kept us safe until we could find each other. I knelt down and touched the headstone. We made it, Mom. We're together now. A gentle breeze rustled through the cemetery, and for just a moment I could swear I smelled Mom's perfume. That evening we had dinner with Cassian's family. His wife, Miranda, had welcomed me with open arms, and their daughters, Sophia, 8, and Emma, 6, had immediately decided I was the coolest aunt in the world. Tell us about Grandma Eleanor again, Emma asked as we sat around the table. I looked at Cassian, and he nodded encouragingly. Well, I began. Your Grandma Eleanor was the bravest person I ever knew. She made very hard choices to protect the people she loved, and she never stopped fighting for her family, even when it meant sacrificing her own happiness. Was she pretty? Sophia asked. She was beautiful, Cassian said, just like your Aunt Elena, and just like you two, I added, making both girls giggle. Later, after the girls were in bed, Cassian and I sat on his back porch, looking up at the stars. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom had been brave enough to leave Dad earlier? I asked. Cassian considered this. I think she was exactly as brave as she needed to be. She saved me by letting me go, and she saved you by staying. And now we're both here, both whole, both free to make our own choices. I still can't believe you dropped everything to come save me. That's what big brothers do. Cassian smiled. Besides, I had 37 years of protecting to make up for. You know what the best part is? What? Dad thought he won by keeping us apart all these years, but he actually lost the moment Mom wrote those letters. She made sure that someday, somehow, we'd find each other. His lies couldn't stand against her love. Cassian nodded. Mom always was smarter than he gave her credit for. We sat in comfortable silence, 2 siblings finally reunited, finally safe, finally free to be the family Mom had always dreamed we could be. The next morning, I woke up in the guest room of my brother's house, my new home, and for the first time in 24 years, I wasn't afraid. Dad's voice wasn't echoing in my head, telling me I wasn't good enough or smart enough or deserving enough. Instead, I heard Mom's words from her letter. You are my precious daughter, and you deserve all the love and happiness in the world. Cassian knocked on my door around 8 o'clock. Miranda's making her famous pancakes, he said. The girls are requesting your presence immediately. I laughed and got dressed quickly. Downstairs, the kitchen was chaos in the best possible way. Miranda stood at the stove, flipping pancakes while simultaneously mediating an argument between the girls about whether chocolate chips or blueberries were superior toppings. Aunt Elena! Emma threw her arms around my waist. Tell Sophia that chocolate chips are better. Actually, I said solemnly, I think we need both. A proper scientific comparison. Ooh, yes, Sophia clapped her hands. We can taste test them. Miranda caught my eye and smiled. You're going to fit in just fine here. After breakfast, Cassian walked me to my new job. I'd gotten a position at the local library, something I'd dreamed of doing but Dad had always discouraged. Libraries are for people who can't succeed in the real world, he'd sneered whenever I mentioned my interest in library science. Nervous? Cassian asked as we approached the building. Excited, I corrected. I've never had a job I actually wanted before. What did you do when you lived with Dad? Whatever he told me to do. I worked at his real estate office, answering phones and filing papers. He said it was good enough for someone like me. I shook my head. I can't believe I accepted that for so long. You were surviving, Cassian said gently. There's no shame in that. The head librarian, Mrs. Rodriguez, was a warm woman in her 50s who'd been thrilled to hire someone with my organizational skills. She gave me a tour of the building, showed me my desk, and introduced me to the other staff members. I have a feeling you're going to love it here, she said as she left me to get settled. I was arranging my desk supplies when a familiar voice made me freeze. Well, look who thinks she's too good for the family business now. I turned to see my cousin Derek standing in the library entrance. Dad's nephew had always been his most loyal supporter, and apparently prison hadn't changed his opinion. Hello, Derek. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. Heard you sent Uncle Richard to jail. Derek sauntered closer, his voice loud enough to make other patrons look up. Pretty ungrateful, considering everything he did for you. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared beside me. Is there a problem here? No problem, Derek said with a fake smile. Just catching up with family. Actually, I said, finding my courage, we're not family anymore, and you need to leave. Derek's smile turned nasty. You think you're safe now because you found some long-lost brother? You think he's going to protect you forever? I think, said a voice from behind him, that you're about to find out. Derek spun around to face Cassian, who had appeared silently in the library entrance. My brother was a full head taller than Derek and had the kind of quiet confidence that came from never having to prove himself through intimidation. And you are? Derek tried to bluster. I'm Cassian Henderson, Elena's brother, and you're trespassing in her workplace. This is a public library, which means they have the right to refuse service to anyone who's harassing their employees. Cassian stepped closer, and Derek automatically backed up, especially when that harassment is being documented. He held up his phone, which had been recording the entire encounter. Derek's face went red. You can't. Actually, I can. See, Elena has a restraining order against your uncle, and that extends to family members acting on his behalf. Cassian's voice was perfectly calm, which somehow made him seem more dangerous. This video shows you threatening my sister at her place of work. That's grounds for extending the restraining order to include you. I wasn't threatening anyone. You think he's going to protect you forever? In an aggressive tone while towering over her desk, Cassian shook his head. A jury would definitely consider that threatening. Mrs. Rodriguez had called security and 2 guards were approaching. I think it's time for you to leave, one of them said to Derek. Derek looked between the guards, Cassian and me, clearly realizing he was outnumbered. This isn't over, he muttered. Yes, it is. My voice was stronger than I felt. Tell Dad's side of the family that I'm done being their victim. Tell them I have a real family now, one that actually protects each other. And tell them that if anyone else comes here to intimidate me, they'll be dealing with more than just a restraining order. Derek slunk out of the library, followed by security. Are you okay? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. I'm perfect, I said, and realized I meant it. Cassian hugged me. I'm proud of you. For what? For standing up to him. For not letting him make you feel small. I thought about how I would have reacted to Derek's intimidation just a few months ago. I would have cowered, apologized, maybe even quit the job to avoid further confrontation. But something fundamental had changed in me. I wasn't Dad's powerless daughter anymore. I was Mom's brave daughter and Cassian's protected sister. It felt good, I admitted. It should. You're taking your power back. The rest of my first day at work was blissfully uneventful. I cataloged new books, helped patrons find resources, and even signed up my first child for the summer reading program. When closing time came, I realized I'd been smiling for hours. Cassian was waiting to walk me home, a habit he'd developed and I secretly loved. How was day 1 of your new life? He asked. Amazing, except for the Derek situation, which you handled perfectly. Cassian looked thoughtful. Though I think we should probably expect more of Dad's family to surface eventually. They're not going to give up easily. Let them come, I said, surprising myself with how fierce I sounded. I'm not the same person who was afraid of Dad's shadow 6 months ago. No, you're not. Cassian smiled proudly. You're exactly who Mom hoped you'd become. That evening, Miranda suggested we have a family game night. As I sat around their dining room table, laughing at Sophia's terrible attempts at charades while Emma cheated outrageously at Monopoly, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete, unconditional belonging. Aunt Elena, Sophia said during a break in the games. Are you going to live with us forever? Well, I'll live close by forever, I said carefully. But someday, I might want my own house. Will you get married and have babies like Daddy did? Miranda shot her daughter a look. Sophia, that's personal. It's okay, I laughed. I don't know about marriage, sweetheart. I've never really thought about it before. Why not? How could I explain to an 8-year-old that I'd never believed I deserved love? That Dad had convinced me I was too damaged, too difficult, too worthless to be wanted by anyone? I guess I was too busy taking care of other things, I said finally. Well, now that Daddy's taking care of you, maybe you can find someone nice, Emma declared with the matter-of-fact wisdom of a 6-year-old. Cassian caught my eye and smiled. Maybe she can. Later, after the girls were in bed, I helped Miranda clean up the kitchen. Thank you, I said as we loaded the dishwasher, for welcoming me into your family like this. I know it can't be easy having a strange woman suddenly move in. Miranda stopped what she was doing and looked at me seriously. Elena, you're not a strange woman. You're Cassian's sister. That makes you my sister too. She smiled. Besides, the girls absolutely adore you. You're the aunt they never knew they needed. I've never been around kids much. Dad didn't like them. Well, you're a natural. And honestly, it's been wonderful for Cassian to have you here. He's always carried guilt about being given up for adoption, even though it wasn't his fault. Having you back has healed something in him. I thought about this as I got ready for bed. I'd been so focused on everything I'd gained by finding Cassian that I hadn't considered what it might mean for him. He'd grown up knowing he was adopted, knowing he had a birth family somewhere, but not knowing if they wanted him or would accept him. The next morning, I found Cassian in the kitchen early, making coffee and reading the newspaper. "Can't sleep?" I asked. "Old habit. I've always been an early riser." He poured me a cup of coffee. "Miranda said you two had a good talk last night. She's wonderful. I can see why you fell in love with her. She saved me in a lot of ways." Cassian sat down across from me. I was so angry when I was young. Angry at being given up. Angry at not knowing where I came from. Angry at feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. But the Hendersons were good to you. They were perfect. That almost made it worse, because I felt guilty for being angry when they'd given me everything. Cassian sipped his coffee. "Miranda was the first person who understood that you can be grateful and angry at the same time. That having wonderful adoptive parents doesn't erase the loss of your birth family. Do you still feel that anger?" "Not anymore. Meeting you, learning the truth about Mom's choices, it changed everything. I understand now that I wasn't given up because I was unwanted. I was given up because I was so loved that Mom was willing to sacrifice her own happiness to keep me safe." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise through the kitchen window. "Elena," Cassian said eventually, "I want you to know that you don't have to keep living with us if you don't want to. I mean, you're always welcome, but if you want your own space, are you trying to get rid of me?" I teased. "Never. But I also don't want you to feel obligated to stay because you think you have nowhere else to go. You have options now. You have money from Mom's estate. You have a job you love. You have a support system. You can choose whatever makes you happy." The word choose hit me like a revelation. For 24 years, I'd never really chosen anything. Dad had chosen my job, my friends, even my clothes. But now I could choose. "I want to stay," I said firmly. "Not because I have to, but because I want to be near my family. Maybe eventually I'll get my own apartment nearby. But for now, I love living here with all of you." Cassian smiled. "Good. The girls would stage a revolt if you left." "Just the girls?" "Okay, all of us would stage a revolt." Over the following weeks, I settled into a routine that felt more natural than anything I'd ever experienced. Work at the library, dinner with my family, bedtime stories with the girls, weekend adventures exploring my new city. I was gradually becoming the person I would have been if Dad hadn't spent years trying to crush my spirit. But Dad's influence wasn't completely gone. 3 weeks after Derek's visit to the library, I was walking home from work when a car pulled up beside me. My Aunt Lydia, Dad's sister, rolled down the window. "Get in," she commanded in the same imperious tone she'd used when I was a child. "No thank you," I said politely, continuing to walk. The car crept along beside me. "Elena, we need to talk." "I don't think we do. This is ridiculous. You can't just cut yourself off from your entire family." I stopped walking and faced her. "You're not my family. My family is the people who love and protect me. Richard is your father. Richard is a criminal who terrorized my mother and tried to destroy my relationship with my brother. He chose to be my enemy. So did anyone who supports him." Lydia's face flushed. "You ungrateful little—" "I'm grateful," I interrupted. "Just not to him, and not to you." I turned and kept walking. After a moment, Lydia drove away, but not before shouting something about family loyalty out her window. When I got home, I told Cassian about the encounter. "We should probably document this," he said, making a note in the file we'd been keeping of harassment incidents. "If they keep bothering you, we might need to expand the restraining order." "Do you think they'll ever give up?" Cassian considered this. "Eventually. Right now, they're still processing the fact that their comfortable narrative has been destroyed. Dad convinced them that he was the victim of a malicious prosecution. Learning the truth about what he did, about what Mom endured, it's challenging everything they thought they knew. Some of them might come around. Maybe. The ones who can handle the truth. The others—" Cassian shrugged. "The others will probably keep blaming you rather than face the fact that they supported an abuser for years." That night, I lay awake thinking about families and loyalty and the difference between the two. Dad's family had loyalty, a twisted version that protected abusers and silenced victims. But they didn't have love. Not the kind Mom had shown by giving up Cassian to keep him safe. Not the kind Cassian had shown by giving up his comfortable life to rescue me. Not the kind Miranda had shown by welcoming a stranger into her home without question. Real love required sacrifice and courage. Dad's version of family required only compliance and silence. The next few months brought more healing than I'd experienced in my entire life. I got my own apartment, a small place just 6 blocks from Cassian's house, and filled it with books and plants and bright colors. I joined a book club at the library and made my first real friends. I even went on a few dates, though nothing serious developed. "You're glowing," Miranda observed one Saturday as we watched the girls play in the park. "You look like a completely different person than the scared young woman who showed up at our door 6 months ago." "I feel like a different person," I admitted. "Sometimes I catch sight of myself in mirrors and don't recognize who I'm looking at." "That's because you're seeing yourself clearly for the first time, not through the filter of someone else's cruelty." Cassian joined us on the bench, carrying ice cream cones for everyone. "Dad's parole hearing is next month," he said quietly, once the girls were out of earshot. My stomach clenched. "So soon?" "He's been a model prisoner, apparently. His lawyer thinks he has a good chance. Will you testify?" "If you want me to. But the decision is yours. You're the primary victim in his case." I thought about this for the rest of the day. Part of me wanted Dad to stay in prison forever, where he couldn't hurt anyone else. But another part of me realized that my fear of him had diminished considerably over the past months. He no longer seemed like an all-powerful force of destruction. He was just a bitter, broken man who'd hurt the people who loved him. "I want to testify," I told Cassian that evening, but not because I'm afraid of him anymore, because I want him to see who I've become. The parole hearing was held in a sterile conference room that reminded me uncomfortably of Dad's old office. He sat at a table with his lawyer, looking older and smaller than I remembered. When he saw me walk in with Cassian, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe even regret. "The victim impact statements will be heard first," the hearing officer announced. I stood up, my hand surprisingly steady as I unfolded my prepared remarks. Richard Valdez was my father, I began, but he was never a parent. A parent protects their children. A parent makes sacrifices for their children's well-being. A parent creates a safe space where children can grow and thrive. Dad was staring at his hands, refusing to meet my eyes. Instead, Richard created a house of fear. He controlled every aspect of my life through intimidation and manipulation. He convinced me I was worthless, that I deserved whatever treatment he gave me, that I should be grateful for his care. I looked directly at him now, but the worst thing he did was try to destroy my relationship with my brother. He forged documents, fabricated evidence, and told elaborate lies to prevent us from finding each other. He wanted to steal the one gift my mother had left us, the gift of each other. Dad finally looked up, and I was surprised to see tears in his eyes. But he failed, I continued, because love is stronger than fear. Truth is stronger than lies. And family, real family, is stronger than the man who tried to tear us apart. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I don't want Richard to stay in prison because I hate him. I want him to stay in prison because he's dangerous, because he's never shown genuine remorse or taken responsibility for his actions, because releasing him would send a message to his other victims that their pain doesn't matter. I sat down, and Cassian squeezed my hand. The hearing officer asked Dad if he wanted to make a statement. Dad stood slowly, his orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his diminished frame. He started, then stopped. He looked at me, then at Cassian, then back at his hands. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air. They weren't enough, not nearly enough, but they were more than I'd ever expected from him. I was angry, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Angry at Eleanor for the pregnancy, angry at circumstances, angry at life, and I took that anger out on the people who deserved it least. He looked at Cassian. Your mother was right to protect you from me. I would have hurt you the same way I hurt Elena. Finally, he looked at me directly. You deserved better. You both did. Eleanor deserved better. I destroyed the best things in my life because I was too selfish and cowardly to face my own failures. I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something close to it. Understanding, maybe. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, Dad continued. I know I can't undo the damage I've done, but I want you both to know that every night for the past year, I've gone to sleep thinking about the man I could have been if I'd chosen love instead of control. He sat down, and the room was silent except for the sound of his quiet weeping. The hearing officer deliberated for 20 minutes before returning with the decision. Parole denied. Minimum of 2 more years before the next hearing. Dad nodded, accepting the decision without argument. As the guards prepared to escort him back to his cell, he caught my eye one last time. Take care of each other, he said quietly. And then, he was gone. Cassian and I walked to our car in silence. Only when we were driving away did I finally speak. He seemed different. Prison changes people, Cassian said carefully. Sometimes for the better. Do you think he meant it? The apology? I think he's finally facing the truth about himself. Whether that translates to genuine change? Cassian shrugged. I guess we'll find out in 2 years. I thought about this as we drove home. Dad's apology hadn't erased the years of abuse or manipulation. It hadn't given me back my childhood or my relationship with my mother, but it had done something unexpected. It had closed a chapter. The man who'd terrified me for 24 years was just a broken human being who'd made terrible choices. He didn't have power over me anymore. That evening, I cooked dinner for Cassian's family, a skill I'd been developing with Miranda's patient guidance. As I watched Sophia help Emma with her homework while Miranda and Cassian debated the merits of different vacation destinations, I felt overwhelmed by gratitude. What are you smiling about? Emma asked, looking up from her math problems. Just thinking about how lucky I am, I said. Lucky how? Lucky to have found all of you. Sophia put down her pencil and came over to hug me. We're the lucky ones, Aunt Elena. You make everything more fun. And you give the best bedtime stories, Emma added, not to be outdone. And you always listen when we have problems, Sophia continued. And you smell like flowers, Emma finished, making everyone laugh. Later, after the girls were asleep and Miranda was grading papers, Cassian and I sat on the porch swing he'd installed in my honor. Are you okay? He asked. Today was pretty intense. I'm good, I said, and meant it. For the first time in my life, I feel like I can handle whatever comes next. Even if Dad gets parole in 2 years, I consider this. Even then, he can't hurt me anymore because I finally understand something Mom tried to teach me in that letter. I'm not responsible for other people's choices. I'm only responsible for my own. Cassian nodded. Mom would be proud of who you've become. She'd be proud of both of us, I corrected. We kept her promise. We found each other. We took care of each other. We swung gently in the evening breeze. 2 siblings who'd been separated by trauma, but reunited by love. Can I tell you something? I asked. Anything. For the first time in my life, I'm excited about the future. I don't know what's going to happen next, and that used to terrify me. But now it feels like an adventure. Cassian smiled. What kind of adventure are you hoping for? I don't know. Maybe travel. Maybe graduate school. Maybe falling in love with someone who thinks I'm amazing just the way I am. I laughed. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine any of those things. I thought my life was already decided. Nothing is decided except what you decide, Cassian said. That's the gift Mom gave us both, the chance to choose our own paths. I thought about Mom, alone in that house with Dad, protecting me the only way she knew how while sacrificing her own happiness. She'd never gotten to choose her own adventure, but she'd made sure we could choose ours. I miss her, I said softly. Me too. But she's not really gone, is she? She's in every choice we make to love instead of hate, to protect instead of harm, to build instead of destroy. I leaned against my brother's shoulder, feeling safe and loved and free. Do you think she can see us now? I asked. I think she's been watching over us all along, Cassian said, making sure we'd find our way to each other when we were ready. And now that we have, now we get to write the rest of the story ourselves. The moon was full above us, casting silver light across the quiet neighborhood. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked and someone laughed. Normal sounds from a normal evening in a normal family's life. For the first time ever, I was living a normal life, and it was extraordinary. 1 year later, I stood in the same cemetery where we'd visited Mom's grave, but this time, I wasn't there to mourn. I was there to celebrate. Elena Rodriguez, the minister said. Do you take Marcus Chen to be your husband? I do, I said, smiling at the man who'd walked into my life 6 months ago and shown me what healthy love looked like. Marcus was everything Dad had convinced me I didn't deserve: kind, patient, supportive, and completely accepting of my complicated history. He'd met me during a library program about local history, where he'd been researching his own family tree. We'd bonded over genealogy databases and slowly fallen into the kind of love I'd only read about in books. By the power vested in me, the minister continued, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus kissed me while our small wedding party cheered. Cassian and Miranda, the girls in their flower girl dresses, Mrs. Rodriguez from the library, and a handful of friends I'd made over the past year. It was a tiny wedding, but it was perfect because it was filled with people who truly loved us. As we posed for photos beside Mom's headstone, something that would have seemed morbid to others but felt right to us, I caught sight of a familiar figure watching from a distance. Dad stood at the edge of the cemetery, wearing civilian clothes and looking uncertain. I excused myself from the photographer and walked over to him, with Marcus at my side. Hello, I said carefully. Hello, Elena. Dad's voice was different, quieter, more tentative. I hope you don't mind that I came. I heard through the family that you were getting married today. How are you here? I thought, early release for good behavior. 3 weeks ago. Dad looked at Marcus. I wanted to meet the man who's going to take care of my daughter. Marcus extended his hand. Marcus Chen. Elena's told me a lot about you. Dad shook it, wincing slightly. Nothing good, I'm sure. Actually, Marcus said diplomatically. She's told me about someone who made mistakes but is trying to do better. I looked at my new husband in amazement. We'd talked about Dad many times, but I'd never described him that generously. I don't deserve that kindness, Dad said quietly, but I'm grateful for it. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before Dad spoke again. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to see you happy. He looked between Marcus and me. You are happy, aren't you? Very, I said honestly. Dad nodded. Good. That's all your mother ever wanted for you. He started to turn away, then stopped. Elena, if you ever want to try, if you ever think we could, he struggled with the words. I'm in therapy now, group counseling for men with anger issues, and individual sessions. I'm trying to understand how I became the kind of man who could hurt the people he was supposed to protect. I felt Marcus's hand squeeze mine supportively. That's good, Dad, I said, using the word deliberately. I hope it helps you. It's a start. He looked at Cassian, who had approached quietly. Both of you. I hope someday you can forgive a foolish old man who spent too many years being angry at the wrong people. We're not there yet, Cassian said honestly, but we're not closed to the possibility. Dad nodded, seeming to accept this as more than he deserved. I should let you get back to your wedding, he said. Congratulations, Elena. You deserve all the happiness in the world. As he walked away, Marcus asked quietly, Are you okay? Yeah, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. I am. The rest of the wedding reception was held in Cassian's backyard, under string lights that Miranda had hung between the trees. As we danced to our first song as a married couple, I caught sight of the girls teaching some of the other children a complicated clapping game. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked, following my gaze. Family, I said. How it's not about blood or DNA or who raised you. It's about who chooses to love you and who you choose to love back. Are you having second thoughts about marrying into my crazy family? Marcus teased. I laughed. His parents had flown in from California and had spent the entire weekend spoiling Cassian's girls and telling embarrassing stories about Marcus's childhood. They'd welcomed me with the same easy warmth that Miranda had shown, making me feel like I'd been part of their family for years, rather than months. Never, I said. I'm just thinking about how different my life is now compared to what I thought it would be. Better or worse? Impossible to compare, I said honestly. It's like asking me to compare a prison cell to a garden. They're completely different universes. Marcus spun me around, making my dress flare out around my legs. So, what's next for Mrs. Chen? He asked. I grinned at my new name. I was thinking maybe we could start planning that honeymoon trip to Ireland you mentioned, and maybe after that we could talk about grad school applications. Library science? Actually, I was thinking social work, maybe specializing in family reunification or domestic violence counseling. Marcus's face lit up. You want to help other people the way Cassian helped you, the way we all helped each other, I corrected. No one gets through trauma alone. Later that evening, after most of the guests had gone home and the girls had fallen asleep on the couch, I found myself in the kitchen with Miranda and Cassian, cleaning up the remnants of the celebration. I can't believe you're actually married, Miranda said, drying a champagne glass. 6 months ago, you could barely order food in a restaurant without asking permission first. People change, I said, loading plates into the dishwasher. Some people change, Cassian corrected. You chose to change. That's different. So did you, I pointed out. You could have stayed angry about being given up. You could have chosen to believe Dad's lies about me. Instead, you chose to investigate, to protect me, to build a relationship with a sister you'd never met. We all chose each other, Miranda said, smiling. That's what makes us a real family. As Marcus and I drove to our hotel that night, a charming bed and breakfast where we'd spend our first night as a married couple before flying to Ireland, I reflected on the conversation. Choice. That's what everything came down to. Mom had chosen to protect us both, even though it cost her everything. Cassian had chosen to come find me, even though it meant disrupting his comfortable life. Miranda had chosen to welcome me, even though it meant sharing her husband's attention with a traumatized stranger. Marcus had chosen to love me, even knowing about my complicated past, and I had chosen to trust them all. Chosen to believe I deserved love. Chosen to build a future instead of hiding from the past. Penny for your thoughts? Marcus asked as we pulled into the hotel parking lot. Just thinking about choices, I said. How every moment we get to choose who we want to be. Who do you want to be tomorrow? I smiled. Your wife, Cassian's sister, Sophia and Emma's aunt, Elena Rodriguez Chen, who helps families find their way back to each other. Sounds like a pretty amazing person. She's getting there, I said, kissing my husband. One choice at a time. That night, as I fell asleep in Marcus's arms, I thought about Mom's diary one more time. All those entries filled with pain and regret and impossible choices, but also filled with love. Love that had survived everything Dad had done to try to destroy it. I'd started this journey by finding a secret in an old diary. I was ending it by writing the first page of a new story. A story where love won, where families could be healed, where broken people could choose to become whole. It wasn't the ending Mom had been able to write for herself, but it was the ending she'd made possible for us. And that was everything. The next morning, Marcus and I sat in the hotel restaurant, planning our day before catching our flight to Dublin. I was scrolling through my phone when I saw a text from an unknown number. Elena, this is your cousin Bethany, Derek's sister. I know we haven't spoken since the whole situation with Uncle Richard, but I wanted to reach out. I've been doing some thinking about everything that came out during the trial, and I owe you an apology. I also wanted you to know that not everyone in the family thinks you were wrong. Some of us are just taking longer to process everything. I hope you're doing well. Maybe we could talk sometime. I showed the text to Marcus. Looks like the family healing extends beyond just you and Cassian, he observed. Maybe, I said cautiously. It's going to take time, and some of them might never come around. But some of them might. Yeah, some of them might. I typed back a simple response. Hi, Bethany. Thank you for reaching out. I'm doing very well. I'd be open to talking when you're ready. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was possibility. And possibility, I'd learned, was often the first step toward healing. 3 hours later, we were on a plane to Ireland, beginning our honeymoon and the next chapter of our life together. As the plane took off, I looked down at the city where I'd been reborn from my father's daughter into my own person. My phone buzzed with one more message. This one from Cassian. Have an amazing trip. Can't wait to hear all about your adventures. Mom would be so proud of how far you've come. I texted back. She'd be proud of all of us. Thank you for saving me, big brother. Thank you for letting me, he replied. I closed my eyes and settled back against Marcus's shoulder, feeling the plane carry us toward whatever adventures awaited. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was excited by it, because I'd learned the most important truth of all. When you're surrounded by people who choose to love you, when you've learned to choose love over fear, there's no limit to what you can become. The diary that had started this whole journey was tucked safely in my suitcase, along with Mom's letters and some of the adoption documents that had brought Cassian back into my life. Not because I needed them anymore, but because they were part of our story. The painful parts and the beautiful parts, all woven together into something that had ultimately made us stronger. I was Elena Rodriguez Chen now, wife, sister, daughter, friend. But most importantly, I was someone who had learned that family isn't about perfection or control or fear. It's about choice. It's about love. It's about protecting each other and celebrating each other and never giving up on each other. And that's a story worth living. As our plane crossed over the Atlantic, carrying us toward new adventures and new memories, I whispered a silent thank you to the woman whose diary had changed everything. Thank you, Mom, for loving us enough to make the hardest choices imaginable. Thank you for keeping me safe until I could save myself. Thank you for making sure Cassian and I would find each other when we were ready. And thank you for showing us that love, real love, is the most powerful force in the universe. Even stronger than the men who try to destroy it. 5 years after finding Mom's diary, I stood in the graduation ceremony at State University, wearing a master's cap and gown. In the audience, I could see my entire chosen family. Marcus holding our 6-month-old daughter, Sophie. Cassian and Miranda with their girls, now 13 and 11. My in-laws who'd flown in from California. Mrs. Rodriguez from the library. And even Bethany, who'd slowly rebuilt a relationship with me over the years. Elena Rodriguez Chen, the dean called out, Master of Social Work, specializing in family reunification services. As I walked across the stage to accept my diploma, I caught sight of one more person in the audience. Dad sat in the back row, wearing a suit that looked too big for his frame. He'd been out of prison for 3 years now, and we'd slowly, carefully begun rebuilding some kind of relationship. It wasn't the father-daughter bond I dreamed of as a child, but it was honest, real, based on who we actually were, rather than who we pretended to be. After the ceremony, as we all gathered for photos, Dad approached cautiously. I'm proud of you, he said simply. Your mother would be too. Thank you, I said, meaning it. He handed me a small wrapped package. I wanted to give you this. Inside was a framed photo I'd never seen before. Mom holding a newborn baby, her face radiant with joy and love. That's you, the day you were born, Dad said quietly. I found it when I was cleaning out some old boxes. Look at how happy she was. I stared at the photo, seeing myself through Mom's eyes for the first time, not as a burden or complication, but as pure joy. This is perfect, I whispered. She loved you so much, Dad said, his voice breaking slightly. I'm sorry I ever made you doubt that. Later, as we celebrated at Cassian's house, I found myself in the nursery, feeding baby Sophie while looking at Mom's photo on the wall beside her crib. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked, appearing in the doorway. About stories, I said. About how every family has them. Some are tragedy, some are comedy, some are mystery. Ours started as a horror story, but look how it ended up. Marcus sat down beside me, watching our daughter's tiny fingers curl around mine. What kind of story do you want Sophie to have? An adventure story, I said without hesitation, full of love and courage and choices, where she knows from day one that she's wanted and valued and capable of anything she dreams of. Sounds like a bestseller to me, I laughed. The sequel to How Elena Found Her Family and Lost Her Fear. What would you call Sophie's book? I looked down at our perfect daughter, already planning all the ways we'd make sure she felt safe and loved and free. The girl who never had to wonder if she was worthy of love, I said, because she'll grow up knowing the answer is always yes. Marcus kissed the top of my head. I like that story. Me too, I said, rocking our daughter gently. Me too. Outside, I could hear the sound of Cassian's girls playing in the backyard with their cousins, and Miranda laughing at something someone had said, and all the beautiful noise of a family dinner on a Sunday afternoon. It was the sound of home, real home, the kind Mom had dreamed of but never gotten to experience. But we'd made it real for the next generation, and that felt like the most important ending of all. The diary still sat on my bookshelf, all these years later. Sometimes visitors would ask about it, and I'd tell them the story of how one woman's secret changed everything for her children, how love found a way to survive even the worst circumstances, how families can be broken and rebuilt and made even stronger. But mostly, I just kept it as a reminder that every choice matters. Every act of courage, no matter how small, can change the course of someone's life. Every person who chooses love over fear makes the world a little bit better. Mom's diary had given me back my brother, my sense of self, and my future. But most importantly, it had taught me that we all have the power to write our own endings, and mine, finally, was exactly what it should be: happy.